Welcome into a new BuffStampede Radio. Adam Munsterteiger, the publisher of BuffStampede.com, joined today by Sean Niehoff. Sean, we've got a lot to talk about, and let's start out with Colorado getting some more transfer additions today. Florida Atlantic playmaker LeJohntay Wester joins the fold, and we were talking before we hit record here, Sean, that we've almost gotten spoiled with Colorado recruiting out of the portal, because had this happened 3-4 years ago, this would have been monstrous news, and it's still big news, don't get me wrong, but just another playmaker, another established guy joining the mix.
Yeah, I think that you hit it right on the head. The recruiting over the past 2 years has spoiled everybody, I think, and we were just talking about, even with the Underwood announcement thing, it seemed like everybody was trying to find a reason why he was going to pick Colorado, whereas in years past, just being in consideration, would have been the win for CU. So, but yeah, with Wester joining, that's another difference maker that joins an absolutely stacked wide receiver room, and figures to be the odds-on favorite to be the featured returner on special teams based upon what he's done. So that would be a huge get in any previous cycle, just standing alone. But Shedeur targeted him, Wester, before he even announced his portal entry on Twitter, or X, or whatever we're calling it these days. And it's somebody that he really wanted in the black and gold. So I think everybody really liked that room heading into the season before we even hit this recruiting window. And now you've added Shepard and Wester and Timmons and Cordell Russell, to a room that's already deep and talented. We've got, Miller coming in from the high school ranks, and nobody even knows yet where Cam Michael's going to fit in. So that's another potential body in that room. He could be on the defensive side of the ball, probably a little small to fit in a running back, but in looking at what Dylan Edwards has done, they could see a future for him there too. But if you do put him in that room, it's just ridiculously stacked.
Yeah, to build off your point there, I think I'm putting LeJohntay Wester in Penn as their starting punt returner, and they had another visitor on campus this past weekend that could potentially still commit and be their kickoff returner. But it's going to be interesting to see what they do now with Jimmy Horn Jr. Does he move out of the slot now that you bring LeJohntay Wester in, a guy that's established himself as a top level slot guy, or do you have them compete both at that spot? Do you rotate there? It is kind of an embarrassment of riches at this point now at the receiver position. Wester had 108 catches this past season, which was the most in the AAC. His 19.9 yard punt return average was 8 yards better than any other punt returner in the ACC that returned more than 2 punts last year. He had 36 rushing attempts during his time at Florida Atlantic. So a guy that you can utilize as a running option as well out of the slot position. So this is a big time get. He's got 24 total touchdowns at the college level. I understand it's not necessarily at the Power 5 level, but that ranks number one when you look at all the offensive players that are coming back at receiver, running back, tight end in terms of the number of touchdowns scored. Will Shepard scored 21 in the SEC, so that might look a little bit more impressive just because of the level of competition. But between those two guys, you're talking about 45 touchdowns that they've scored at the college level. So a really impressive. And it doesn't stop there. You mentioned Draylen Miller and Cam Michael. They're going to be joining the mix. You bring in Terrell Timmons Jr., who is a deep threat. You bring in from NC State. Travaris Dawson is still on the roster. He had some flashes this past season before injury sidelined him. And Cordell Russell comes in, a former blue chip recruit after redshirting at TCU. And then you can't forget about Omari Miller in what he did in stretches during his true freshman season. So again, an embarrassment of riches. Even Jordan Onavu got hauled up by Coach Prime late in the season and praised for his work ethic. So many guys in the mix at that position. Anything to add there? I think it will work itself out, but you're probably going to see a deeper rotation at receiver just to keep those guys happy because you want to have that room engaged and not just focus on four guys because you've got about 8 to 10 options now at that position.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at there are a few question marks, but most everybody that they've brought in and the players in that room are solid. And we'll talk a lot about that, I think, as we talk through some of the recruits that they brought in and what Prime's recruiting strategy was going into this cycle. But unlike last year where they were just looking to infuse talent, and a lot of that talent were guys that didn't necessarily get an opportunity where they were at previously, and came in. This year, the focus has really been on adding starting talent. So guys that were starting at their prior school and bringing them in so what they're bringing to the table, instead of wondering why they weren't playing or if they were just buried where they were at. And so you've got, I think Cordell Russell comes in with a little bit of baggage and some indications that he maybe wasn't the most coachable player. You've got, Omarion Miller, who while he flashed last year, Prime, made it known that part of what was holding him back was just consistency and consistent effort and practices. And so he showed up, for one game huge and showed up in some other spots, but he also disappeared just as quickly. But now with the depth that you've got and the proven players, both returning and coming in, through this cycle, I think the bigger question is going to be how are they utilized and how do they figure out how to get everybody on the field and in what roles. And we still don't know that because we don't really know what the offense that they're going to run is going to be. And that's a question on both sides of the ball that I'm sure we'll talk about as we get into this podcast.
Wester was commit number 20 in terms of transfers coming into the program. Number 19, just a couple of days prior, was DJ McKinney transferring in from Oklahoma State. He was a scout team star there while redshirting in 2022 and then stepped into a big role in 2023, played the second most snaps among the Cowboys cornerbacks in 2023. Only 44.9% of the passes attempted at his receiver were completed. So that's a really good rate that he had there. Graded out at 68.8 by Pro Football Focus. For comparison's sake, Sean, only Travis Hunter and Shiloh Sanders graded out better on Colorado's defense this past season. You also bring in Preston Hodge from Liberty, and there was some word that he would be competing at corner. He also got experience at nickel and safety. So there's question marks in terms of how kind of this cornerback depth is going to shake out. You got a guy like Jacquez Robinson who played corner at times last year, but could also play nickel or safety. Does Adam Hopkins stay at cornerback long-term? Is Isaiah Harge still in the mix long-term at Colorado? Is Marion Cooper going to have a redemption story in 2024? There's so many question marks there, but you look at bringing in DJ McKinney, a guy that's got 3 to play 3, you can develop him, and you've already seen signs that he can compete at the Power 5 level. So you're kind of venturing into the territory of an embarrassment of riches at cornerback as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, McKinney, talking about him, that's another transfer that fits that stated recruiting focus that we got from Prime this year of targeting starters in the portal. And he's another guy that started early. So he's got he's got a lot of runway in front of him. He's still got 3 years to go. He's another young player, and made an early impact at a quality, what's now P4, I guess. We can't talk about P5 anymore, but a quality P4 school. So I'm not sure where he fits into the pecking order in a secondary that's become really deep and really talented. And it features a lot of players, like you mentioned, with a lot of versatility. So the additions of McKinney and Hodge, they give Mathis some plug and play options, but you can't overlook, the guys like the good Omarion Cooper that we saw last year, and were his issues, talent issues? Were they injury issues? We really don't know the full story on there. And then you've got both Travis Jay and Jaquez Robinson with a full year post-injury under their belts. So you look for, there's a lot of talent there. You look for a big, step up and return there. And then you've got the young guys. You've got Cormani and you've got Stoutmeyer, who were baptized by fire last season. And that's only going to help in their development as they grow. And then you brought in, some other talented freshmen that really didn't see much time, but that give you some added depth and talent in Namir Robinson and Israel Solomon and Isaiah Harge. So it's really become a deep group, and that's not even really focusing on the just the true returning safety and nickel guys that they've got. And who really knows what's going to happen and where they see a guy like Trevor Woods, fitting in? Does he move back full time into the secondary? Did they like, moving him down into the box and taking advantage of his skills? Although he's a little light there, but he's about the same size coming down there as Demoy Kennedy, and so what do they do in those positions? But that secondary now becomes, probably your second deepest and most talented position group on the team.
Today's episode is brought to us by Macaulay Capital Fractional CFO Services. Is your business looking for financial guidance and support, but not yet big enough to hire a full-time CFO? Well, we have a solution for you. Hiring a fractional CFO who can work with your business on a part-time basis. You get the benefit of having a seasoned financial expert on your team without the commitment or expense of a full-time hire. And here's the best part. It's likely that a partnership with Macaulay Capital will be a win-win situation, meaning that your business will make more money from the guidance of a fractional CFO than the total cost of partnering with us. For more information or to set up a meeting, please visit MacaulayCapital.com. That's MCCAULEY Capital.com. A side note, Deon Figures is set to be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. He's one of 19 players in the 2024 class. He's going to be the 11th Buff inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame, the second Colorado defensive back to earn the honor, joining Dick Anderson. Deon Figures is already talking about how Chris Hudson needs to be the next Buff inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. Obviously, Chris Hudson, the Thorpe Award winner, a few years after Deon Figures won that prestigious award. People that have followed Colorado for a long time obviously know Deon Figures helped clinch the national championship back in 1990. I mentioned that he was a Thorpe Award winner. When did you start following Colorado? I'd imagine Deon Figures was prior to your time following the Buffs.
Yeah. I grew up, watching them from that. So the time frame that he played was right in the time frame where I was a senior in high school and moving into college. But man, that's another one of my favorite players from like my playing days, such as they were. But as you mentioned, Thorpe Award winner, national champion, consensus All-American, first round draft pick, and I just I look back in my mind's eye and you've got the guy playing cornerback with shoulder pads that are 3 feet wide and taller than the ear holes on his helmet, in the era of, cut jerseys and tucked up jerseys and everybody showing their midriff. And so you just kind of picture this guy that was shaped like a triangle and making plays all over the field. So I think this one was long overdue. Like many of the other Buffalo's Hall of Famers, they have been. They kind of come later than you would anticipate. But that, he has, I think it was 3 in just the last 3 years, right? 4 years? 4 years, yep. I guess. So, the enduring image that I have of him is that the game-sealing interception in the Orange Bowl for the national championship, sliding down to the ground and giving himself up. Man, that's just an iconic moment in Colorado football, and I think that's long overdue. And as soon as they announced that, my first thought, like his, was next up is Chris Hudson. It's he's got to be next on the list. So It's a great honor, well deserved, and I think long overdue.
And now everybody's asking, okay, guys, you talked about all this stuff, but what about the staff? We get asked, we see questions every day on the Buff Stampede message board. When is Coach Prime going to announce this staff? And we've heard that, this defensive coordinator hire is going to have some NFL pedigree. Maybe that has something to do with the timing. Obviously, NFL season just ended, and there are obviously teams gearing up for the playoffs. So we're speculating on all of that. At this point, all we know is officially is that Vincent Dancy is going to replace Nick Williams as the outside linebackers coach, getting promoted. After that move took place last month, Phil Lodeholt is going to be the new offensive line coach. Those are the only two moves that Coach Prime and his camp have confirmed so far. So we're waiting on the announcement of the defensive coordinator, and you would assume safeties coach unless they change responsibilities on the defensive coaching staff. Haven't got the official word on the tight ends coach. It does sound like that's probably going to be an in-house promotion that's going to take that, but that hasn't been announced yet. And then still not 100% sure Pat Shurmur is going to be the OC. It sounds like there could potentially still be an outside hire there, again, with NFL pedigree. If that doesn't take place, they're definitely comfortable with Pat Shurmur having that role. And obviously, Shedeur Sanders has developed a great relationship with Pat Shurmur. So as much as that would make some fans question it, especially folks that were familiar with Pat Shurmur when he was with the Broncos, and that leaving a sour taste in their mouth. That's going to be maybe a little bit more criticized if they don't go to an outside hire there. But what are your thoughts on this? We're on Coach Prime's timeline here, and I don't expect the news to get leaked until he wants it to, unless it comes maybe from a national folk. I've mentioned this, folks that are locally here, they respect Coach Prime. If he doesn't want it out there, we're probably not going to break the news. And the people that are closest to him, and the only few people that probably know what's happening with OC and DC and those searches, they respect Coach Prime. So they're not going to be doing a whole lot of talking. So it's been pretty tight-lipped. But the longer this goes on, the more and more people are anxious and want to find out what the staff is going to look like from top to bottom in 2024.
Yeah. Man, I don't know. It's like you said, he keeps things so close to the vest. We don't know we don't even really know who's in play. There's been rumors on, about guys that are in play, but most of that is message board and social media speculation, just trying to put, pieces together on who he's got some background and some history with. But you look back to the two initial hires last year at offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, and those really came out of the blue and were widely considered to be pulls that were punching above CU's weight. And at the time, we didn't really know what kind of influence, Prime was going to have in being able to bring in a staff. And so maybe even punching above what his weight was, the expectation at that time. So, we haven't heard any names beyond Shurmur at this point. And, even with all the offensive additions this offseason, it's, I'm not sure that Colorado has the personnel to be elite in a more traditional pro style Shurmur offense. So it'll be curious to see kind of what they put together, if he runs it, what he melds between what they were doing last year and what he's done in the past. So we're waiting on some sort of an announcement, clarification, just like everybody else on that side.
And that naturally segues us right into the Buff Stampede Radio mailbag, because JT Mitchell 83 asked, well, actually he just posted Jim Leonard ... And that's a good start to the mailbag segment here, because there has been some buzz with Jim Leonard, but what created this buzz was a fake burner account on X/Twitter. Again, like you, I don't know what to call it these days. And then I think there was a mistake by a CU staffer that was maybe searching for his name, and it went out there as a tweet before it got deleted. So color me skeptical on that, and a little bit apprehensive to buy into that buzz. If it's true, though, I mean, I will gladly doubt at Macintosh Burner and E Crow if that's the pick, because that would be a home run hire. But I don't know. I trust Carl Reed's reporting more, obviously. This is somebody that's really close. He's a colleague on 24/7 Sports. He's really close to Coach Prime. And he mentioned that, there's going to be NFL pedigree there. Now, Jim Leonard played in the NFL for a long time, but he isn't coaching the NFL. Would that qualify for something that would fall in line with Carl Reed's tweet? I don't know. That would maybe seem like a little bit of a stretch, unless, again, he was referring to his playing days. But I mean, if they can hire Leonard, you do it yesterday, in my opinion.
Right. No, absolutely. It's, defensively, it's that same tight-lipped scenario. With a lot of names that are out there, but again, I don't know that there's really anything behind those names other than speculation. You've got, Mike Zimmer's been brought up, who has connections, Ken Norton Jr., Lovie Smith, Jim Leonard. It's all, social media and message board speculation at this point. And there has been no slip from inside the Champion Center that even hints at who he might be looking at and targeting. And like you said, the only thing that we got was from Carl Reed's, talking about the NFL pedigree. From that list, I mean, Leonard would be a home run. I personally, really like Norton, but my guess is that if there was any legitimate smoke with any of those names that have been brought up, we would have heard something, anything by now, because none of those are hires that you would necessarily be waiting on for a season to wrap up for something to happen. And I think that, you would have wanted that person in the building by now, both from a recruiting and a scheme planning standpoint, if they were available to come in. So my guess is the hire is going to be someone that hasn't even registered with all the people making guesses to this point. And given his track record, you have to think it'll be somebody that does bring some excitement. So I think we're just like everybody else and waiting for, some of those lips to loosen up, or for Prime to get back in the swing of his public engagement, and and let somebody know. And more than likely, it's not going to be a story that's broken by you or by Carl Reed or by anybody else. Based on the way he's done things, it's going to be some announcement that comes out on some national program where he's sitting there for an interview and lets everybody know who he's identified.
Just to close out on Leonard, you look at the defenses that he had at Wisconsin, and they were all pretty solid. They ranked 28th nationally in points allowed per game in 2022, 6th in 2021, 9th in 2020, 10th in 2019. Not as good in 2018, when they ranked 43rd, but they ranked 3rd in 2017. Colorado hasn't had a defense that ranks higher than 70th nationally in scoring defense since 2016. So he was a finalist for the Broyles Award in 2017. It would fall in line with Uncle Neely's tweet that this hire is going to rock the world. It would fall in line with Carl Reed's 3 mind-blown emojis that he put out there regarding this hire. But again, it wouldn't quite fall in line with the NFL coaching pedigree that maybe I was reading too much into that with Carl Reed. Well, I guess time will tell, but Jim Leonard, he was a senior analyst at Illinois, so he's going to be moving somewhere, you would think, as a defensive coordinator, if not a head coach. I mean, he was going to be the head coach at Wisconsin had it not been for Luke Fickell deciding to leave Cincinnati. And Fickell had just a few years prior to that turned Michigan State down for their head coaching job, and we're all familiar with what happened from there, and that led to Mel Tucker's departure from Boulder. But this is a future head coach. Probably a defensive coordinator at the very least in 2024. So I don't want to add too much fuel to that, because again, I just don't really trust the reporting that's out there on him being a candidate right now. But it would be certainly exciting. And again, it would shock the college football world if he did take the gig. That transitions us into Buff Bosco, who asked us who we want to be the new OC in DC. Do you have any thoughts there? I think you mentioned Ken Norton. That would be your pick for DC.
Well, I mean, I like him. I mean, Leonard, if Leonard was really available, I like him. Out of the other names, I don't dislike any of them, but I like Norton. I think that I think he brings a lot to the table with him. But I'm pretty convinced that we haven't even heard the name that is going to fill that spot. So who do I want to be it? I don't know, because I don't really know who's in play. So I do think that if any of the names that were out there, like I mentioned, if they were in play, I think we're at a point now where we would have heard something. There would have been some movement on it, and at this point, we haven't heard anything. So it leads me to think that it's possibly somebody who, you know, who maybe from the NFL side just wrapped up their season, or maybe is still continuing their season on the playoff run. So you're not really going to hear anything for a little while. But I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine on any of that.
Yeah, I think Jim Leonard's the home run hire if you could pull that off. With some of the other rumor names, you mentioned Mike Zimmer, Ken Norton Jr., Lovie Smith. I mean, there's cases to be made for all of them, but then question marks as well with those three guys. Ed Reed's been thrown out there a lot. I would have more concern with that hire just from the lack of experience being a defensive coordinator. But maybe Lovie Smith would be my next option given his more recent history in college football. I know Ken Norton's been in college the last couple of years, but hasn't been as a coordinator. That's been as the linebackers coach there at UCLA. So all those guys would be good hires in my opinion, but Leonard being the home run out of the mix. But to your point, maybe it's a guy that's going to be out of left field. In terms of OC, Sean, I'm still holding out hope for Byron Leftwich. There was a lot of buzz about him taking the job when they moved Pat Shurmur to play caller duties and on some level demoted Sean Lewis this past year. Now, Byron Leftwich has been a defensive coordinator in the NFL at two different places, and maybe it's a situation where he's going to wait to see if there is an opportunity to be a coordinator in the NFL this coming season, as we're going into silly season with coaching for NFL. But if he doesn't get that job he wants there, and it's not a slam dunk, he doesn't have the experience as an OC in college, but he's been by Boulder a few times. He's got that relationship with Coach Prime and that relationship with Shedeur Sanders as well. So I would assume if you could bring in Byron Leftwich, that you'd still have Pat Shurmur on staff. What would you think about that?
I think I would like that better than just the sliding Shurmur down. But I think either way, what I would really like to see ideally is backfilling the staff, even if you give Shurmur make him the full-time OC, backfilling kind of the analyst role that he played last year with somebody out of the college ranks. I just don't feel like, and I mentioned it earlier, but I don't feel like this roster is built and developed and has enough talent and depth on the lines, even with what they brought in, to really run a true pro style offense that's going to be really run heavy. I think there's a desire to kind of get into some of that for a variety of reasons. I think that it takes a lot of stress off the defense if you're able to control the clock, if you are not as don't have as sped up of an offense. So that's going to help some of the challenges that the Buffs had this year. I think that there is a desire from a personal standpoint to make sure that Shedeur is as NFL ready as he can be, which means putting him in an offense and running the sort of scheme that he's going to be asked to run at the next level. So I think those are some reasons to make you think that there's going to be, whether it's Shurmur or somebody else, that there's going to be more NFL pedigree there. I personally would like to see somebody involved that does come out of the college game, and where you can mix some of the more wide open spread sets, a little bit of the kind of hurry up tempo type offense that we had last year, and meld that with whatever they do. But I have no clue at this point. I'm counting on Shurmur being heavily involved, no matter what his role is, and just kind of taking a wait and see approach on everything else.
Davis Buff asked, while we wait for the coaching announcement, what is your way too early, too deep for the offensive line and defensive front seven? And along those lines, Valm42 asked, based on who is on the team right now, give me your early guess at the starting 5 offensive linemen for the spring game. I'll let you lead off here, Sean. Who you have as your starting 5 for the spring game? We'll start there, and then we'll fill in the depth behind that.
So I'm going to go with, and this is assuming health, but I would go with right now, front 5 of David Connor, Tyler Johnson, Hank at center. I just kind of feel like Yakiri Walker doesn't really have the size, unless something surprises us, as when he comes in and gets into the system. And then on the other side, Khalil Benson and Savion Washington. And I think Jordan Seaton is going to get a lot of reps and is going to get game reps, even if he's not the guy, and eventually step into one of those tackle spots. But I think it's just tough to go out there from day one with a true freshman, even of his caliber. And Tyler Brown's going to be in the mix on the interior, but he's had a year away from playing, and I think that's going to put him a bit behind those high level guards that they brought in with Johnson and Benson. So I think that's kind of my front 5, and maybe digging a little bit into some of that too deep that we talked about.
Mine's pretty similar to yours. I had jotted down Khalil Benson for sure on the O-line, Justin Mayers as a guard, and then I was kind of torn between Seaton and Savion Washington. I'm going to go with Jordan Seaton just to try to get him as many reps with that first group as you can this spring, and really trial by fire with him at left tackle. But certainly wouldn't surprise me if it's Savion Washington in that group as well. Was kind of torn between Tyler Johnson and Tyler Brown. Maybe at this point I would go with Johnson. And I agreed with you, Zelinskis at center, with Yakiri Walker probably being the backup there for now. In terms of depth, you mentioned David Connor. I feel like him and Philip Houston are going to kind of battle for that 4th spot on the depth chart, unless they decide to bring in another guy there. As much as this group has been upgraded, you still wouldn't mind seeing another guy added there, just for assurance purposes, in terms of making sure that you've got quality depth at all spots. But maybe Yakiri Walker is the guy that's going to surprise us all. I think that him being undersized is why a lot of us have kind of not written him off, but maybe don't expect a whole lot out of him. But this is a guy with starting experience. So it's hard to say at this point. If you put a gun in my head, I'm going to go Jordan Seaton left tackle, Justin Mayers left guard, Tyler Johnson right guard, Hank Zelinskis center, and then give me Khalil Benson at right tackle. But it's good that that's a discussion though, right? Because I think last year, what turned out, the fact is, guys were starting that should have been 3rd or 4th on the depth chart. Now you're talking about having 3 or 4 starting options that are competing for those spots. So they've definitely upgraded that group quite a bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I would like you said, I would like to see them bring in another true tackle. And I honestly would like to see them bring in another center. Even if it's a guy who hasn't played a lot, just because that's a position that there's been a lot of talk about, taking this newfound depth that we've got at the interior offensive line and cross-training to a center. But I don't think that's really feasible unless it's somebody who has played that position in the past. And look at the issues Alabama had at center in the semifinal game against Michigan. That likely cost them an opportunity at another championship, and he was the best they had as a true center. So I think that's one spot. You've got the walk on that's also coming out of IMG, right? That is a center, but I really think you need another body there and another body out on the edge. I do like Benson because he gives you the ability. He's played tackle, he's played guard, so he gives you the ability to kind of cross train a little bit. I'm really high on David Connor. I like what I've seen of him in the past. The issue you've got with him is he's also like Tyler Brown is he's a full year away from football and really doing anything meaningful. But he looked really good ahead of his injury last year, although it was just off season work, and he looked really good at Florida. So and I think Kareem Harden and Isaiah Judd are going to figure into that mix the depth mix at some place. And I'd be surprised to see either Welty or Bailey in the mix at all, unless Lodeholt can work some sort of magical transformation with them. And if, with the ability to transfer a second time now, I wouldn't be surprised as we kind of get into spring and some of that two deep starts to shake out to see those be guys that go into the portal and look for a better fit, and then that kind of opens up some additional spots to see who else is leaving in spring and possibly bring in some more quality depth.
Yeah, just going back to David Connor, I'm glad you pointed him out because he's one of the true wild card guys on this roster, because you see him walking around in street clothes and he's one of those all bus guys.
Yep.
With him and Jordan Seaton, if you had both those guys out there, you're going to have some edge guys shaking in their boots, because they're two of the more physically impressive offensive tackles that I've seen in Colorado's program in a long time. If he does prove that he's ready to battle for playing time in this roster, then my question marks about that offensive tackle position are really minimized. I mean, if Philip Houston is a legit candidate to battle in there as well, I mean, you probably have 5 starting caliber guys at tackle, so he could be a real key guy if he proves that he's ready to go, coming off that hand injury that he had that sidelined him last year. What about defensive front 7?
Yeah, it's really hard for me at this point to go beyond really the frontline guys there, because there's 2 big questions still hanging out there, and that's one is who's going to be that defensive coordinator and what defensive scheme are they going to run, and then the second is the status of Shane Cokes. I think it looks like he's going to stay. There hasn't been any formal announcement yet. So, if he stays, I think he's in the mix along with McNeil to start alongside Chidozie Nwanko, because I think we'll just call him Chidozie. I think he's a lock, just based on his performance and what he's done there. And you've got some more body types with McNeil and Cokes. So, so I think they're kind of looking at that spot alongside them, but you've got 3 good guys in the mix for those 2 spots. And Quinn Barnes is a bit of an outlier in terms of the recruiting strategy this year, because he's one of those guys that they brought in like they brought in last year. All kinds of physical tools, a lot of promise comes from a blue blood program, but he hasn't seen the field in 3 years. So if he hasn't gotten on the field, what is it that's kind of kept him behind? But those are the chances you're willing and often have to take on the interior, because next to elite quarterbacks, I think the interior defensive line is the hardest position to recruit to. You just don't have a lot of quality bodies, a lot of quality size that you need, and what is available is sitting on blue blood rosters. So I would go ahead and pencil in Samuel Okunlola at one edge, and DJ Lundy at one linebacker spot. And then the remaining spots are kind of wide open, and comes down to what the defensive scheme is going to look like, which we still don't really know. That defensive end, outside linebacker, edge spot, there's a ton of talent and depth on the roster that I like. I really like Arden Walker. I think Taj McCoy is going to be a stud as he continues to physically mature and develop. And then that trio of Kari Mans, Steve Harris, and then you're looking at a healthy, Joshka Gustav. That gives you a lot of capable bodies to fill those 2 spots. on the edges. So linebacker still needs an infusion. I love Lundy. Bentley proved to be serviceable, but was pretty stiff, and I'm not sure he showed great instincts last season. So he's got one last run. We'll see how that plays out and whether he's the type of linebacker that, fits with, side by side with the Lundy, or if he, pencils in as Lundy's backup. And then we'll have to see how Demoy Kennedy looks with another full calendar year in his recovery progression. Jeremiah Brown's going to be back on there, and so he's just a serviceable guy. We don't know yet about Gant's waiver, and he also, we don't know how he's going to look once he's had some full time to recover, and then we have to wait and see how last year's 3 freshmen develop. So I think that's one of those spots that's really kind of at the top of my list, is to try to find another inside linebacker in the portal between now and spring.
Yeah, good stuff there. One guy to point out in this front 7 that I think is going to be a real valuable weapon when they are in pass rush situations is Pitt transfer Samuel Okunlola. He played less than 300 snaps for Pittsburgh last year, but tied for the team lead in sacks. So he's a plug and play pass rusher from day one. And in terms of the defensive line, yeah, I think Shane Coates, Chidozie, Nwankwu, and Amari McNeil are kind of your top guys, but I don't know if those 3 guys are necessarily going to all start together, because you got Chidozie that's more of an interior guy, and Amari as well, and Coates can kind of play a lot of different techniques up front. But maybe you have a guy like Quincy Wiggins comes in and kind of plays the role that DJ McClendon played last year, where he plays on the end of the line and could have a big impact. Bishop Thomas, who knows? We see at the end of the documentary that he was suspended for not taking his academics as seriously as he needed to this past season, but he certainly got a high ceiling. And I'm not writing off these true freshmen coming in, because they're going to be early enrollees. Brandon Davis Swain and Eric Brantley Jr., although they're not the longest guys coming in, 2 of the more productive defensive linemen in the high school ranks nationally this past year. And it wouldn't shock me if either or both of those guys, especially if some injuries happen up front, get part of that rotation on the defensive line this coming season. And Keaton Wade is another intriguing guy coming in from Kentucky on the edge, a guy that we're not talking a whole lot about, that could potentially prove to be a little bit more solid than some of those returning guys that, maybe had an up and down season this past year. D.B. Harris and Kyrie Mans had their moments, but they also had some lapses in there. So it's really tough to predict right now on that front 7. I mean, DJ Lundy, you would assume, is going to be one of the linebackers out on the field the most snaps this coming season. I don't know. Can you play DJ Lundy and Vonta Bentley a bulk of the snaps together at linebacker, giving up something in pass protection? That would be a concern, maybe.
Yeah, that's a big question I have with, which is why, I think those 2 maybe slot at one spot, but it's hard to tell what this defense is going to look like. Are we going to roll with a similar defense to last year? Is somebody going to come in, whoever they identify, and make some tweaks and changes to it? And are we going to have a different scheme, a different front look? As much as we talk about those 3 guys on the interior defensive line, and I forgot about Wiggins. I didn't even have him on there. I kind of spaced that ad. So you've got Wiggins coming in there, but what I think we don't have, unless you're able to use Coates in that role, is somebody who's that true, almost NFL style defensive end who's a run stuffer, and really more of a true defensive lineman type. It seems like we've got a lot of those edge outside linebacker body types, and so I'm hopeful that we'll get more production than we had last year in terms of pass rush. And I think that Okunlola is definitely gonna add to that, and there's a lot of young talent, but we'll just kind of have to see how that plays out. It's hard to do a lot of answer a lot of these questions that are out there at this point in time, because I think so much of it hinges on both sides of the ball. how people are utilized with what we're really looking at in terms of the scheme and who they're going to bring in to coordinate those, both the offense and defense. So everything is a big question mark, which doesn't give any of the the readers of the posters a lot of answers. But I think we're a little bit left, as curious as they are as to how things are going to shake out.
Well, the best part of it is we just keep listing off all these names, right? And you're not going to bat 1,000 when you're bringing in transfers, but I think they're going to have a better batting average with the transfers that they've brought in this year than they did last year, just because, again, you mentioned it earlier, Sean, there has been more of an emphasis on we're going to bring in guys, not all of them, not all these guys have starting experience, but the vast majority of them do. And so when you have that starting experience and you're going up against guys that were in the program last year, you got so much more competition across the board this year than you did last year.
No, absolutely. And so I think that's, last year was a big wait and see in terms of the players. What did we really get? Why did these guys not have more of an impact or get more time where they're coming from? And, I think that last year you took some chances and you took some swings on players with injury because you knew that there was talent behind the injury. And so while they may not pay off for you immediately, you were kind of building that overall roster talent, that depth. And so this year we'll see with some of those guys how they shake out. We mentioned, Robinson and Travis Jay earlier, Demoy Kennedy, and if Brendan Gant is able to come back, a lot of these guys that came in, and David Connor on the offensive line, these guys that weren't able to really play last year, what do they bring when they're fully healthy and have a full off-season spring ball, to kind of go through and get themselves ready. So I do like where we're at, where CU is at from a talent perspective and serviceable bodies. We just have to see how it all fits together. And, one of the guys that I'm going to be looking at most closely, just because he's another guy that does have the question marks, like we talked about, is Anquin Barnes. Can Sal turn him into somebody that's even serviceable and just a space eater up front, because he's got that, he's got the body type, he's got the size to be able to do that, to be able to kind of anchor down the middle of the line and chew up bodies that let your linebackers play. I'm really looking forward to just seeing how he develops. And I think he's a good flyer to take in a position where there's not a lot of quality players to be able to land.
And that leads us into a question by Andrea1552. Have we added enough talent / depth on the offensive and defensive lines to become a legitimate bowl team in 2024? How would you rate the progress this year versus other years? Are the players we are bringing in going to finally change the narrative on the line play? We kind of started talking a little bit about this, Sean. I mean, in terms of he's setting the bar at a legitimate bowl team, and to that, right, that's an easy answer. Absolutely. I mean, they were pretty close to being a bowl team last year. Do they not blow a 29-point lead to Stanford? Do they find a way to get another win and get 6 wins in 2023? They weren't that far off with arguably the worst offensive line play in the country. So now you bring in all these offensive linemen that have starting experience, and you've got increased competition at so many different spots. To me, and I don't know if this is a biased answer, being on the CU beat and being a little blinded because I'm not following what every other team in the country is doing and just focusing solely on CU with tunnel vision. But I'm putting the floor at a bowl game in 2024. That's kind of where my mindset is. I think they get 6 wins. Now the question is, can they go up from there? And if so, how much? That's more where my question is. I really do think that they have unquestionably a bowl roster right now.
No, I agree. And to the other part of the question, I think the line play is going to be significantly better this year, just based on that added talent that they brought in. And so, the offensive line, it will be much better. I think the defensive line added some nice pieces and replaced what they had to, and I think maybe even improved in some areas. but I'm right there with you. I think last year, as bad as the offensive line was, and as bad as the defense ranked statistically, I don't think it was the line play and a talent issue that kept CU from being a bowl team. I think it was more of the um, culture and the belief, and kind of once things started slipping away, not really having the ability internally, inside the locker room to be able to stop that and to turn things around. So and that's critical. And so that's going to be a big question mark this year too. You've got those guys that did play that year together. Now you're adding some new pieces and a lot of new pieces that you're going to have to integrate because you're counting on them. So how quickly can they bring that all together? What sort of, to use Prime's, kind of word, his mantra for last season, belief, are those guys going to have, and can you get everybody pulling in the same direction? And I think that's a bigger key than what we've got. We know that I think the line play is going to be much better on that, but it's how does everything else come together? And again, what are we running? What kind of offense are we running? What kind of defense are we running? Those are the biggest questions that I've got. I think the pieces are there to plug in. But what are you plugging them into, and how do you bring, another 25 to 30 by the time we're done with this, and maybe even 40, depending on what happens in the spring. How do you bring those new bodies in, integrate them, and get everybody on the same page?
ScoBuffs 80 asked, if you had to rank needs in the spring portal timeframe, what positions will they address? Again, maybe a little bit premature because this window is not, you can't enter the portal unless you're a graduate at this point, or unless you played for Michigan or Washington, but you still have some guys that are out there that are getting recruited. And I don't know, the position that comes to mind first, Sean, of being a question mark in terms of the spring portal time is running back. Is Savion Wilkerson really done? He walked on graduation. It looks like he's selling insurance now. It sounds like he's not going to be back, although nothing official has come out there. So then you got to look at, okay, how does Alton McCaskill look this spring? Does he look like your lead back? Is Michael Welch going to be a depth piece from day one? We already know what Dylan Edwards can do when he's utilized properly. It feels like if Wilkerson is done, you probably need another body there, right? Where do you look at the needs as you kind of project, again, not having a 2020 vision in terms of what this team is going to look like coming out of spring ball?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I'm not as worried about the running back spot. Obviously, if I think that's one of those things you almost need to wait till spring to see how things shake out and how does Alton McCaskill look in spring, and is he is he to the point where you need him to be, and that kind of colors some of your direction there. One of the guys that we mentioned way back at the beginning of the podcast may have a role in the backfield. We just don't really know yet, and that's Cam Michael. And he's slight, but he's a pretty electric guy. He's got he's very athletic, and I think he can play a lot of spots. But you're looking at again, he's a spot duty guy that you need to scheme around, kind of like Dylan Edwards, use him the right way if that's where he lands. So I do think that they probably need to have their eyes open for another running back. I personally would put my number one target that they need to bring in between now and the end of spring or the summer period at another linebacker. I think they really need to try to identify another linebacker as my one spot. And then, like we said, I would still like to see them add more if some quality becomes available. At the offensive line, primarily on one of the edges on the offensive line and the interior defensive line.
Yeah, I had linebacker and tight end as 1A, 1B. I think you got to bring in another body at tight end, just simply and not just to make him a depth piece, but to add to competition there. And in case something happens to Medire, you've got another option there. I don't know if you can count on Luis Passerella for that. I know he was a good story last spring, but we just have not seen him out there on game day for the Buffs. And it's a lot of pending spring ball results, offensive tackle, because we talked about it. If David Connor is legit, you probably don't need an extra offensive tackle. Maybe you needed an extra defensive tackle. I know they were going after Chris McClendon, who ended up at Missouri. Coach Prime's tweeted out that they want to add another body there. So, and then possibly running back. But I mean, by and large, you feel okay with fielding this team if you had to tomorrow.
Yeah. No, I think they've done a good job up to this point. We're so micro focused on on the depth chart in the roster for CU, but as I started kind of going through and looking at, there's some talent that's still out in the portal now, like you mentioned, they entered for this window, and that where there may be some options, but as you start looking at that and looking at what other teams have lost and what they brought in, I think it's a pretty common refrain amongst anybody who's maybe not, one of those top 5 to 7 blue blood programs that are pretty loaded. There's holes everywhere. So, and I like what they've done plugging a lot of the holes. So there's still a couple of spots they could add some depth to, but I feel comfortable, at least going into the spring with what they've got right now, and then we'll kind of see how some of it shakes out. And unfortunately, you're going to lose some players. Hopefully, it's good attrition into the portal out of the spring, and you cross your fingers that you don't have any injuries, because I still do think that that's one of the areas that where there's some question marks is in some of the depth on this team. You've got a couple of spots, the wide receiver room, the defensive backs, where I think you're pretty loaded with depth. But, I think once you lose 1 or 2 bodies in some of the other spots, all of a sudden you're really exposed.
You mentioned attrition, and that leads us into a question by OMG, You're Dumb. He asked, as Stewart at CU at the game noted, it's surprising CU has only lost 11 players to the portal. How many CU players do you expect to see hitting the portal after spring practices, and what position groups do you see having the most attrition? And along those lines, T. Chala 93 proposed an over-under of 10.5 current Buffs hitting the portal before the start of the 2024 season. So, Sean, that number to me is actually 8 scholarship players that have hit the portal, because I'm not counting Owen Carey, who was not on the roster this past fall. I'm not counting Caleb Fourier, who didn't finish the team. He quit midway through. And I'm not counting Michael Harrison, as good as he was last year. He was a walk-on. So we're going to be talking, 8 scholarship players that have left the roster. That is a little bit less than I expected. Now, Coach Prime has now brought in a lot of these players, so it's not going to be like it was, obviously, his first winter at the helm. I don't know. I guess I would have probably guessed more like a dozen would have left as opposed to 8. So maybe a little bit lower than I would have thought.
No, I agree. I thought that, and I'm surprised, at this point at some of the names that we haven't heard entering the portal. I really thought that, guys like Bailey and Wilty were going to be a couple of the first guys out, especially with the staff changes, with the challenges that they had, and the fact that Prime he didn't mince words and last season and really kind of laid into that group and said that was an area that he was going to focus on with top priority going into the offseason. So I'm more surprised at some of the names that haven't entered, but not at the numbers. I think the numbers are pretty reasonable. Going to the other part of the question, I think you're looking at probably about as many as have left now, maybe another 8. I would put the under at, I would take the under on the 10.5 number, maybe, except that I think that some of that's going to come into what else becomes available in the portal between now and through the spring, um, because there may be some additional ads that just from a numbers basis end up kind of forcing some players to the portal. So, but as things stand today, that's kind of where I sit.
I like it. I had jotted down 9, so we're about the same thinking in terms of taking the under there, but only slightly under. Uh, I went down the eligibility chart, Sean. I counted 14 players that if I got alert that they had hit the portal, it would not surprise me at all. Now, are
Yeah,
all 14 of those guys going to hit the portal after the spring? Probably not. So that's where I kind of came in at that 9 number. Some of that comes down to the fact of are there some guys that are willing to take on a special teams role, because you do need guys that are going to fill in those spots. And if you can have scholarship guys filling in some of those special teams roles, that adds a boost to those units. But, you know, guys want to play and they want to have a chance to start at their position. So there is definitely going to be, I would think, at least 7 guys
yeah.
that hit the portal after the spring. Beats by Dr. Doom asked, do you think Trevor Woods moves back to safety or will he stay at linebacker next season? And to follow up that, Philly Buff asked, who do you think starts opposite Shiloh this fall? And then he asked question mark Trevor Woods. So let's start with Trevor Woods. He clearly graded out better and played better at safety than he did at linebacker last season. So I hope to see him back at safety, but we have not had a chance to talk to Andre Hart or Coach Prime, and we don't know who the safeties coach is going to be at this point. So we don't have clarity as far as that goes. I sure hope to see him at safety, though.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would like to see him move back. The question is where does he fit best in the new scheme? I think his move down into the linebacker role last year was a bit of you know I think they felt like he was mentally capable. They knew he was a little undersized, um, but it was more a testament to his mental acuity and his smarts as a football player, and just the fact that they needed bodies. They needed somebody that they could put in there that they could count on doing the right thing, um, even if he wasn't the stoutest body. So some of that's going to come into really seeing how that linebacker position, that group shakes out, and what does that group look like. I would have to think, just based on talent, that whoever they bring in to run the defense still runs something similar, at least in terms of structure, to what we had last year, and is going to be, where you've got the extra safety on the field instead of an extra linebacker, just because that's where the talent on this team is. But that remains to be seen. It could all shift and shake up. But I would like to see him back at safety, and I think based on the roster that we have right now, he's potentially the starter next to Shiloh, but with as many bodies as they brought in, and especially this latest addition this week of DJ McKinney, I think that maybe puts somebody like Cameron Selman Craig or Preston Hodge to be more capable of being the other safety in the back if they need to use Woods in a different role. So I don't know. Again, I feel like I'm answering every question with more questions, but
Well, yeah, that's what you do when it's January 9th and you're getting questions about uh, things prior to spring ball. But yeah, I think at this point, Shiloh and Trevor Woods would be my guess. Next in line would probably be Cam Selman Craig, because like you said, I mean, you got guys like Miles Slusher, Jaden Milliner Jones, even Preston Hodge that could play nickel. So you got a lot of options for nickel. I know Cam Selman Craig is a playmaker out of that nickel role, so it wouldn't surprise me to see him, Shiloh, and Trevor be the main guys out there again in 2024. But you've got some interchangeable pieces there that gives you the ability, and that helps too when guys get banged up, because you're playing guys at different spots, but they can still fill in that role without there being a drop off. So again, you got to like the depth in the defensive backfield going into 2024. Chaz Climb asked, what is Coach Prime doing to address the kicking game, particularly kickoffs and long field goals? Well, as long as Jace Feely is still on the roster, I mean, you're not going to have more than 2 scholarship kickers. So it's either a walk-on stepping up into that role, or I am curious to ask Coach Prime about that. And it won't be the next time we talk to him, which is going to be the early signing period, February 7th. We're going to be, if I'm lucky, I'll get 2 questions to ask, and I'm just not going to talk about the kicking game. But as soon as we get into spring ball, I'm curious to see what he has to say about that, because that was one of the issues that they have to fix. Was Feely dealing with some type of injury, or was a mental block? Because he certainly got the leg strength to do that job, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't being done consistently this past year.
Yeah. Well, and I'm wondering too if that's one of those things they look at in terms of staff in the off season too, because you didn't really have I guess you had special teams by committee, and you had an analyst role who was kind of functioning as the special teams coordinator, and not really, I think the kickers, and this is the case in a lot of programs, but the kickers are left out there to kind of fix themselves and to do their own thing. So I think there's a lot of questions. We'll see what kind of happens as they go through their individual off-season stuff and get back with their kicking coaches and how they come back in the spring on that. But my answer to the question and what he does to fix it is I don't think he does anything. I think it's one of those things that he has, he's got the faith that he has in Mata. I think he likes the strength in Feely's leg if Feely's right, whatever that means, whether it's physical or mental on that. And so I think he sends them back to do their thing in the off season and get with their teams, and trust that they're going to be what he needs them to be when they get back to camp.
Buck and Fuffalo asked, is the QB room set for 2024? Is there a chance the 2025 starter is currently on the team? And along those lines, Peak View Buff asked, take a wild guess and we won't hold you to it. The starting quarterback in 2015, who will it be?
In 2025?
2025, yeah. Let's start though with is the quarterback room set for 2024? I would think so at this point. You brought in 2 transfers there.
Yeah, I think it's set. And honestly, I think it's as deep a quarterback room, in terms of quality that CU's had in recent memory. Seems like that's always that. Not only have they had a hard time identifying and bringing in, the high level elite quarterback that's going to be your guy, but they've had a hard time bringing in quality, bringing in and keeping quality backup depth. So with these transfers coming in, I think you got to like the talent. They've got, you've got some experience there. And then you've also, you've got guys that were recruited. You're not full of walk-ons in that room. So I think they're set. I like what they've got going into 2024. In terms of 2025, is that starter on the team, and who do we think it is? My guess is that starter is on the team, but they're not going to. I don't think Prime's going to just ride with that. I think that he's going to look to add that 2025 elite quarterback still. Underwood just made his commitment to LSU, but that's a long way off, and you've got to look at the fact that may still be in play. But even without that, I think that looking at who was, help me out, who was the other quarterback? Antoine.
Destin Wade, Walter Taylor, and Staub.
No, the other one they're recruiting, Anton Hill.
Yeah, AJ Hill. Yeah,
he's still in play. I think he's a viability. Even in the last week or two, I've seen other 25 recruits tagging him on some, some tweets with the, CU question mark, eyeballs, all that kind of stuff. Like, is that the move? So I think he's still in play, and I think they're still looking at their next elite quarterback behind Shedeur, and still trying to bring him into the room, and aren't just going to settle on what they've got. So that 25 starter may be in the room, but my guess is maybe the 2025 finisher is not on the roster yet.
Yeah, I mean, this can obviously go a lot of different ways. And a lot of that depends on what Destin Wade and Walter Taylor show you. Are they solid this spring, and do they show a high ceiling? If you bring in an Antoine Hill, you're probably doing that with the condition that he gets to come in and compete for the starting job from the jump. And that was a question asked by VA Buff, if CU still a serious contender for Antoine Hill. And everything that I've heard leads me to believe, yes, they are. And his decommitment wasn't, I don't like CU. It was, well, I was planning to reclassify, and now that I'm not, and I'm going to stay in the 2025 class, I've got a long time to figure this out. I don't need to have this decision made already. It wasn't I don't like CU anymore situation. So certainly there's a possibility to get him. If you don't get a Bryce Underwood on a flip, or an Antoine Hill, or another elite quarterback, then I think what you do is you go into the transfer portal next year, and you're going to be a really attractive option, because you're going to have a lot of talent at other places on the roster. And unless Destin Wade and Walter Taylor have done something to establish themselves as the heir apparent, you're a real attractive place for a transfer quarterback. So I think it's one of those things where you really can't predict it. But if you put a gun to my head and said, is the quarterback starter in 2025 on the roster, I would probably guess no right now. I think would be my guess.
Yeah, I think you nailed it right on the head. I think the only way that he's on the roster again is if you bring in an elite quarterback for that class, who you're going to give the ability to compete, and that's part of what you're promising. And if for whatever reason he's not ready to be the opening day starter, then maybe that starter's already on the roster. But I said maybe not the finisher. If you don't land an elite quarterback, it's definitely going to be somebody you bring in through the transfer portal. I don't think you're counting on any of the three guys, that are the three guys that are in the room being that guy, with the caveat that, knock on wood, if something were to happen to Shedeur this upcoming season, and one of those guys gets a lot of playing time and really explodes on the scene, then that changes everything. But I kind of see quarterback, recruiting, not only at CU, but in general, kind of turning into, unless you've got to add depth to a room, there's not a lot of, you don't have time to develop quarterbacks, and there's not a lot of benefit to bringing in guys that are just, going to be your backup practice squad guys and filling out a roster, a room for the roster. I think that you're going to be looking at targeting those, top 6 guys that fit your scheme from a quarterback perspective, and looking for that elite high school talent. And if you don't land that, then your quarterback room is going to be built out of the transfer portal.
And before we close out on this topic and get to our last question, I'm realizing we're probably discounting Ryan Staub too much. It's just hard until we know what kind of scheme they're going to be running going forward. And I don't want to discount him too much, because I did like what we saw from him in that Utah game in his first start. But again, it's just hard to know, is his long-term future in Colorado, or is he going to go somewhere else where maybe he feels a better scheme fit in a different offense? It's hard to say. Dude, we were never better asked, how realistic is it for the CU fan base to expect CU football to be better than the likes of Oklahoma State? Gundy is seemingly a perennial top 20 team, with the expected recruiting classes stacked one after another for multiple years, and the size and talent and depth that goes with it. Do we have our gold-colored glasses on? I'm more worried about Utah. I don't know about you. I mean, Oklahoma State definitely has had a lot of success under Mike Gundy, but uh, I think Utah with their Polynesian pipeline and just being so solid in the trenches year after year, that's the program that's harder to replicate. As long as Coach Prime is in Boulder, I don't think it's a case of having gold colored glasses on. It would be a case of having blenders on.
Yeah.
But I think CU can replicate Oklahoma State just fine with Coach Prime. But yeah, it's the trenches year after year that you're just going to have to really do a good job of bringing in talent through the portal to be able to stack up with the Utes. What are your thoughts on this question, Sean?
No, I agree with you. I think Utah has built has built such a strong program, and as long as Whittingham is there, and maybe after he's gone, it's going to continue just to ride with the pipelines they've got. They've become a premier destination for transfer talent, and they get a lot of good high school talent. So Oklahoma State, yeah, I mean that they I think they're kind of at that next level, kind of maybe a half a step below Utah, and even with the way too early 2024 rankings or whatever the ESPN did that came out yesterday or this morning. Both of those teams are in that top 25. I think Oklahoma State's somewhere around 15 on there, but that's a program that's just been really built on putting a team together. They don't ever recruit at the top of the country. They just recruit solidly, kind of to the level that that maybe CU is now recruiting, but you're looking at building your programs a little differently as well, or you're building one program while you're maintaining another one. So, good team. They don't threaten me. They don't scare me. I still think that Utah is the team to overcome. And I'm curious to see what happens with Arizona. And what Fish has done there. He's starting to bring in some really good talent. He's had some good classes. He's had some good transfer classes. And what happens with being able to build a team and keep it relevant in Tucson, and is that a place that Fish stays beyond what he's done? I kind of feel like this year for Arizona was a little bit like TCU last year, where you caught some lightning in a bottle. A lot of things went right. Their ability to continue to plug and play quarterbacks that come out of nowhere and become really effective players that just kill teams is incredible. If we could have half of that quarterback luck at CU, we'd be doing all right. But that's kind of where I see things laying out. And I think the rest of the Big 12 is, I think it's a very middle heavy conference going into next year. So I think that you probably have 6 teams that feel like they've got a real legitimate chance to win the conference next year.
On some level, it's going to kind of feel like some of the Pac-12 seasons where there's going to be a lot of cannibalizing of teams within the Big 12. Yeah, if you had told me 2 years ago that Colorado's moving to the Big 12, wouldn't have surprised me. I mean, the Pac-12 has been a mess basically since Colorado joined the conference. But had you told me that Arizona and Kansas were going to be a couple of the top pick teams in the Big 12 in 2024, that would have surprised me a little bit. And Kansas is a program, as long as they keep things moving in the direction they have the last few years, is going to be a contender as well. So there's going to be a lot of parity in the conference. It should make for a lot of fun Saturdays. But again, in the old model, it would have just completely ruined your chances of getting in the playoff. Now you've got a 12-team playoff, and you've still got that greater chance to get in. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to be going out to Orlando for the first time, covering they go to Kansas as well. They go to Lubbock. So it's not going to be the fancy road trips that we're used to in the Pac-12, but I'm looking forward to it. We talked about that in our season wrap-up pod, but new is exciting, and I'm going to kind of ride that high of excitement as they join the new conference.
No, absolutely. And I'm hoping to get out. I love Lawrence, so I'm hoping to get out to Kansas this season. I probably will end up doing more road games this year than I have in the past, just because they're more accessible. But I anticipate that I'll probably end up in Lubbock for the Texas Tech game, just because so much of my work I spend a lot of time in West Texas, so I can kind of kill two birds with one stone. With that, and we'll see beyond that. Oklahoma State's a possibility too, we'll see. I'm looking forward to it, and I think it's I think that you are going to have that cannibalism probably in the conference, but it also sets up that if you can really put some solid classes together, and I'm not just talking high school classes, but overall recruiting classes together, that it's the conference is kind of set up for any team, and why not that be Colorado to really kind of become the dominant player in that conference and let everybody else feed on each other, because you're not you don't have anybody that's really at any sort of a blue blood caliber inside that conference. So I think you're going to have a lot of teams that that are 8-win teams, maybe 9-win teams, and if you can figure out how to put yourself consistently above that, you've got the ability to kind of be the cream of the crop in that conference.
Well, Sean, we got a lot of questions today. We tried to answer them as best we could, but it even within our answers provided more questions that we have about this roster as we look ahead to spring ball. Sean, we've gone well over an hour. This is a marathon, not a sprint. We got a long off season to get through, but it was great to get your insights, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Absolutely, anytime.
All right, and thanks everybody out there for tuning in.